Hi, besties. Yo, it's another episode of Fun Bible Stories with JAYDORA. And of course, we're still dealing on our Joseph series. The stories have been so amazing. Today, we're just going to continue from where the last episode stopped. So, while Joseph was still in prison, something interesting happened. Two inmates had dreams that they didn't know the meaning, like they didn't understand the dreams, they were confused, and they needed someone to interpret it. And somehow they narrated the dream to Joseph. Well, Joseph, being exceptional and having the power of God at work in him, decided to interpret their dreams. Now, the first person was Pharaoh's cupbearer, and the second person was the chief baker. Cupbearer's dream, yeah, he had a dream that there was a vine tree, and this vine tree had three branches, and these three branches were filled with ripe grapes that were blossoming. And then he plucked those grapes and squeezed it into a cup and offered it to Pharaoh. Now, Joseph interpreted his dream to be that in 3 days' time, Pharaoh was going to reinstate him to the position of being a cupbearer, right? Now, the chief baker dreamt that he had three baskets on his head, and these three baskets were filled with baked goodies, a lot of baked food items. But there was a twist. Birds were feeding off those goodies on top of his head in that basket that he was carrying. Now, this was Joseph's interpretation. Joseph told him that in 3 days' time, his head was going to be cut off. That means Pharaoh was going to execute him. Nobody should interpret this kind of dream for me. Like, you're telling me that I'll die in 3 days. But anyways, that was actually what happened. So yeah, he gave them the interpretation to the dreams, but he pleaded with the cupbearer to please remember him when Pharaoh reinstates him and makes him his cupbearer. So as he's going to the palace, don't forget me, this boy that interpreted dream for you, so that they can release me too from prison, right? Cupbearer was reinstated, and the other guy was eventually killed. And then 2 years passed. Nothing from this cupbearer. Like, he literally forgot about Joseph in the prison. He was just busy enjoying in the palace. Because why? But as God may have it, Pharaoh has his own dreams, and he didn't know the interpretation to the dream. He was also confused and needed someone to help him interpret the dreams. Now, he called all the wise people in Egypt to tell him the meaning of the dream, but none of them could decipher what the dream was about. And the cupbearer now remembers eventually that, there's this guy I met in the prison that interpreted my own dreams for me. Like, he can actually tell us the meaning of this dream. He even went ahead to say, I have sinned against God. I mean, he acknowledged the fact that he even forgot about Joseph entirely. So he tells Pharaoh, and Pharaoh was like, okay, send for him. And that was how they brought Joseph to the palace, so that he can tell them the meaning of the dream. When Joseph arrived at the palace, Pharaoh was like, so I learned you're gifted in dreams. You can help me interpret my dreams. And Joseph was like, no, Mio, I don't even have the power to interpret dreams. It's only God that can interpret dreams, but let's hear your dream regardless. And then Pharaoh goes, I had a dream, and in my dream, I saw 7 fat cows grazing by the shore of the river Nile. And then I saw another 17 cows that just came out from nowhere and ate up the 7 fat cows. But there was another thing. After they ate up the 7 fat cows, they still remained tiny. That was the first dream. Then he also narrated his second dream. I also dreamt that I saw 7 fat bunch of grains all in a stalk, and then there was also this 7 tiny bunch of grains that came and ate up the 7 fat bunch of grains. But after eating them up, they still remained tiny. So through the help of God, Joseph was able to interpret Pharaoh's dream. So he was telling him that the 7 fat cows and the 7 fat grains represented 7 years of bounty. They were going to experience bountiful harvest. They were going to have enough food, their agriculture was going to improve enough to even store, plenty. But then the 7 tiny cows and the 7 tiny grains was also representing 7 years of famine and hunger that was going to follow suit after the 7 years of bounty. It will be so bad. There's going to be drought in the land that they will ever forget that there was this 7 years of plenty. So after Joseph narrated this interpretation, Pharaoh was in panic mood. The guy feared. He was so worried. He was like, so what are they going to do? And Joseph was like, this is not a problem, at least not yet. Since there's going to be 7 years of bounty first before the 7 years of famine, it's simple. Just get one person, one trusted person from among your cabinet members, and just make him in charge of storage. Let them store up food all around Egypt in that 7 years that there's going to be plenty. Let them just build storage in the name of the king and just store food enough that is going to last them through the 7 years that the famine will also show up. Wow, when Joseph made this suggestion, Pharaoh was very, very impressed. He marveled at the level of wisdom He was like, at this point, I don't think I trust anyone enough to handle this situation. So since you already brought up this solution, you're the best person to handle this task. So from today, you become the prime minister of Egypt. I am making you in charge of all the storage that you talked about. So Pharaoh removes his ring of authority, gives it to Joseph, and even hands over his daughter, one of his daughters, to Joseph to marry. He didn't just get a promotion, he even got wife. You say what? From prison to the palace. That's what the grace of God can actually do in someone's life. So Joseph became Pharaoh's second in command. All right, this is where we're going to end FBS for today. As usual, I'll be sharing what I learned from this story, and I'll be in the comments to hear yours too. So I learned here that no matter how long it takes, destiny will always find its course. Now, the cupbearer left the prison and totally forgot about Joseph, but God never did. It must have taken years, but God still remembered Joseph and orchestrated an event that brought him right back to the palace, and his light eventually shone. Alright guys, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Till I come your way next time, keep reading your Bible, prayer every day. Bye.